Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I want to take a look at 3 knives. One I've had for a while, 2 I just got. Kind of do a comparison, and then I'm going to come back and talk about knife steels. Stay tuned. Alright guys, we have a comparison of knives today. These are kind of considered budget knives, but yet they pack a good punch. They have a good inherent value. And so I've had this knife for a long time. This is the Ontario Rat 1 in D2 steel. And here's 2 new knives I've bought recently. This Kershaw Link in 20 CV and this Hogue Deka in Magnacut. So let's do a little bit of a comparison here. First of all, the boring part. Kershaw comes in a pretty cheap box, maybe slightly better, but not much better on the Ontario. Hogue, it's at least a nice big box, even though it might be the smallest knife. And it does come with this little carrying case. But in all honesty, no one cares about that. Let's talk about just the overall feel of the knife. The Ontario Rat has always had a great feeling. It just really feels like a high quality knife, but yet at a value price, a budget price, which is why it's always been considered a good starter knife. Or if you want to get a good knife for a good price, this is the way to go. This Kershaw length also feels pretty good. Now it's, I think, slightly heavier. And it's pretty solid as well. It does have a spring assisted blade, spring assisted flipper, which usually comes in pretty cheap knives, but this thing is pretty good. But like I said, it has that 20 CV steel. This knife is very lightweight, so if you're looking for a super lightweight knife, this might be the way to go. However, it feels the cheapest as well, especially when it comes to the grip, the plastic grips. The handle is just feels pretty cheap. It's squishy, you can literally squish it, and it's just geared for being lightweight. But like I said, the steel is what makes this thing so good. Current value, if you were to go on Amazon and try to buy these, or eBay, about a half bill, about 50. This is a little under 100. This is a little over 100. On just the fit and finish, I would give this top marks, then this last. On handle material, on how grippy it feels, this nylon feels pretty good. The aluminum definitely feels fine. And the plastic, once again, feels cheap. I would give the edge to the Rat again. Comes to the pocket clip. This is my least favorite pocket clip, however, it will do the job. Always liked that pocket clip. It just seems like it really works perfectly. And this one is pretty good too. I don't mind at all. Let's talk about ergonomics. This aluminum handle feels pretty good. Place for your thumb here, your forefinger, has the curved handle. It just all in all feels pretty solid. It has a good ergonomic feel to it. This one, once again, just feels better. I have big hands, so that might be why that I feel this way, but to me this one has the best feeling. Just overall feels like very ergonomic, very good grip. Once again, this is the least. Not that it feels bad, but just it kind of has a hot spot right here on this belt clip, this pocket clip, and then it just doesn't have the best grip, although the grip isn't terrible. So once again, this is made to be lightweight. This is definitely going to be lighter than the other ones, so that's what you're going for. Kind of like the Benchmade bug out, that might be what you like. This is a fairly thick blade, but it has a nice edge to it. This one's definitely the thinnest, but it will obviously hold a good edge. This is kind of right there with the Rat as far as being bigger. It's really big down here. It's just personal preference there. Now, the steel is where this is at, right? So all right, so that's my thoughts on those 2 new knives and my Ontario Rat. I want to talk a little bit about knife steels. Like I said in the prior segment, the Ontario Rat's in D2, which is a carbon steel, so it's not stainless. The other ones was in Magnacut, which is a brand new steel that just came out, and also 20 CV. Now, I am by no means an expert on knife steels. In fact, I probably would be considered a newbie when it comes to understanding them, but I'm fascinated, and I have been learning quite a bit from watching videos, from reading articles, and I just find it fascinating. So if you're a newbie like me, when you think of a good knife, you know, you don't think of the steel, you think of the name brand first and foremost. I just came back from Bass Pro, went into their knife shop. Now they did have some nice knives. You walk in there, you see a bunch of Gerber, you see a bunch of Buck, and you see some other brands that are okay. And there's nothing wrong with any of those knives, but for the most part, none of those knives have very good steel. They have what 20 years ago was pretty good steel. And in today's time, really, it's very low grade compared to what we have available to us. We've made leaps and bounds in the last 20 years in metallurgy. And those old knife steels like 440C that used to be just amazing, or AUS 8, a good stainless steel that used to be amazing, we've really surpassed those many times over. Now you do come around the corner and there is a section with bench-made knives, and they do have some nice knives in that knife shop. But you look at those Gerbers and those Bucks with old steels that was popular 20, 30, 40 years ago, and they're $70, $80, $90 for some of them, just because the name is Buck, you know? So even though I think Buck is a good knife company and does make very quality knives, a lot of it is in the name. Now there's another way to look at this. You could say, well, don't be a steel snob. You know, those steels have been working for a long time and they're excellent. They might not have the hardness, but they're very tough and you just have to sharpen them a little bit more, but there's nothing wrong with them. And you can take either aspect of looking at this and neither one's wrong. So speaking of hardness, when it comes to knife steels, you have hardness and toughness. And you can't have both at the same time. You can have a balance of both, but you can't have maxed out hardness and maxed out toughness at the same time. When it gets to the extreme hardness, it's going to become potentially brittle and probably going to chip a lot easier. The tip is not going to be able to do a lot of prying, for instance. So a really, really, really tough knife is probably going to have a little bit of give to it. Probably not going to be extremely hard. And a really, really, really hard knife is not going to be super tough for obvious reasons. So you kind of have to pick your poison. But typically speaking, a bushcraft knife, a knife you would use while camping or something like that, that type of knife is generally more carbon steel and it's generally tough. And then you have other knives that might be more corrosion resistance and be more stainless, or they might just be more intended for slicing and not beating on or prying, and therefore they might be a lot harder. So you balance out the toughness and the hardness, and then you also have, are you focused on it being corrosion resistant, wear resistant? Are you focused on it on having good edge retention so it'll stay sharp for a long time? Or are you focused on ease of sharpening? You like to sharpen a knife, you don't mind to sharpen it quite often, and you want to be able to do it at home with relatively cheap sharpening tools and not have to pay a lot of money to get a professional to sharpen it because it's so hard. So many years ago when I bought my first Ontario Wrap Model 1, I literally bought it because I was Googling and just researching the best budget knife. Like, what knife can you buy on today's market in which you're getting the best bang for your buck? There's obviously much nicer ones, there's better ones, but they cost so much more, and I'm focusing on the law of diminishing returns here. I've got limited money and I want to just get a really good knife. And I just kept seeing Ontario Wrap Model 1 over and over and over again. And I bought it in a steel called AUS 8, which is just a pretty good all-around stainless steel. Now AUS 8 30 years ago would seem like the greatest steel in the world. Today, it's not. It hasn't changed, but the quality of knife steels and the availability of quality knife steels and just metallurgy in general has improved so much that AUS 8's not that good. So eventually we got the Rat 1, the Rat 2, And then they started to come out with D2 steel. And the big thing was D2 is more of a carbon steel. It's not as rust resistant, but it's going to hold an edge longer. So it's kind of an improvement on AUS-8. And back then there was some Benchmade knives that was using D2. They cost $100, $200. And so the Ontario Rat in D2 became the king for a while. And fast forward a few years, now the king is considered to be M390. Its equivalents, which is CPM 20CV, which is what my knife is in, the Kershaw link, or I believe it's 204P. And they're just basically 3 different companies making the same type of knife steel. And it just seems really to be good. It focuses on edge retention and corrosion resistance. And they're not the toughest, but they're decently tough. So there are knives out there like S110V that are extremely edge retentive and very corrosion resistant, but have terrible toughness. And then you can just balance this around. There's steels like H1 that is 10 out of 10 on corrosion resistance, but not quite as good on the edge retention or the toughness. And you basically just have this balancing act. Well, M390, 20CV, basically was more of a balancing act. You had really good edge retention, really good corrosion resistance, and pretty good toughness. If you were to get a bushcraft knife today or a field knife, a fixed blade knife, you probably wouldn't get it in one of those, though they would be good. But you'd probably prefer toughness as your number one thing, and then good edge retention and corrosion resistance. Something like a 3V is really good in our modern day for having all the components, but really focusing more on the toughness. Now, one interesting thing about all these steels is they're not ultra new. They might have been around for decades, and almost all of them were not created for knives. There's tool steel, and there's high-speed steels, and there's all these different steels created for just things in the manufacturing world. But yet, we've decided, hey, that would be a pretty cool knife steel. And it turns out to be better than any other knife steel that we've used before. And then the Magnacut has come out recently. KnifeSteelNerds.com is a great website, and the guy who makes that website, he also has a YouTube channel. I think his name is Laren Thomas. He created Magnacut. He submitted it to Crucible Industries, and they decided to make it for him, and it's become a phenomenon. It's very similar to 20CV, but it's tougher and more corrosion resistance. It probably will not be as good on the edge retention. It's still good though, but definitely is even better on corrosion resistance and definitely better on toughness. So knife steels are a fascinating thing. Just wanted to talk to you a minute about that kind of stuff. What do you know about knife steels? What's some of your favorite pocket knives? I'd love to hear all about that kind of stuff. I've enjoyed showing you these knives, and I'm just going to leave it there. And until next time, take care.